how to set up the shot. That, I guess. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty good stand, right? This fucking thing. Yeah. Perfect. Hey. If you're watching this video, then that means you've reached the end of Game 3. You have actually figured out the answer to the final piece. Congratulations, first of all. That was definitely a hard one, and there were definitely a lot of red herring answers to that. Because there's a lot of ways that could be taken, there's a lot of meanings to it, but in the context of this specific final game, what have you, it's a lot more specific, and I guess a lot deeper than everything else. The thing is, all these overlays, these memories, everything, in a way there isn't really a specific meaning, but overall I like to take them as symbolizing just how spontaneous this whole thing really was. I like to think that each of them all represent, I guess, a different form of web series storytelling, whatever the fuck you might want to call it. And I guess I'll take the overlay I used in Inconvenience, that one. I'd say that kind of represented a pretty spontaneous web series, just clearly winging it. Just kind of like a typical web series, really. Honestly, there isn't much to it. That's the one that I guess represents Exodus. Something that kind of breaks the norm. Nothing too crazy. Then there's the one I used for videos like Cryptisis, which represented the Warden. I'd say that one took on also again a typical web series, but with a bit more abstraction, slightly more cinematic, kind of, a bit more inspired. And then there's the one that I guess represents Icarus, which was that, also a VHS static kind of thing. And that one, I used it a lot in Act 3. That one I guess represented a much more cinematic and still shot heavy kind of project. I don't know if anyone's gonna come around soon. Probably. Aside from that, then there's the watch camera overlay, which really definitely represented a much more abstract kind of storytelling in a way. And obviously I didn't breaking a lot of norms, trying a lot of weird shit, I'd say. And then I guess for last, kind of, there's the one that I guess was used in Azalo's logs back in Act 5, which I'd say that represented it was also experimental storytelling, but in a much more scattered fashion. The kind of out of sequence storytelling thing where you have to piece together what happened first and all that. I'm sorry for all the pauses, by the way. I should be getting food soon, so I'm not sure if they're here yet. And that's 5 of them, but I guess the only one that is left out is that final overlay, which you've seen a couple times, but if I have to be blamed about that final one, in a way it is, and it also isn't like a typical overlay. The one I'm referring to is the one that I used after for the 2 videos after 15, the end of Act 3. That one. And not only that, but it also takes on the form of, well, those game reviews, I guess. Basically everything that I was making before I quit the reviews, and also before I really put all that weird cryptic shit in the videos. Yeah. That was that final overlay, if that makes sense. You might be thinking, like, what does that mean then? What does that represent? That represents just reality. Every time that overlay is there, every time, well, at least almost every time that overlay is there, overlay depends on the context, but that was me, just in its rawest form, unbridled, just me. There's nothing more to it. And you might be thinking, like, how come? And, well, you see, the thing is, I think a common misconception that some of you might have is that you think that all of this was, like, planned, or that you think the game reviews were intended to, like, be quit after a certain point. No. I always have wanted, like, when I started them, I genuinely wanted to actually just stick to game reviews. I wasn't thinking that this would become what it is now. I wasn't thinking that this entire thing was going to become a giant web series, not by follower base, but just by the amount of content, like, you know, spanning over 6 years, and just becoming this multi-genre fucking 6-act intermission prelude whatever thing. Like, that was not the intention when I started this. And every time that you see that overlay, at least, like, when it comes to things like the videos after 15 and before the intermission, those were genuine just clips of me. I wasn't really acting out anything. I wasn't exactly playing a character, per se. That was just me. And I think what that ultimately means, I would like to think that highlights that how big all of this has become, and how, in a way, this whole thing was meant to be really an experiment, and that it, no matter how many different forms it takes on, it's all still really telling the same story, you know? Whether I'm telling it through a very experimental lens, or a cinematic one, or a low budget kind of feel one, implying this thing ever had a fucking budget, but you get what I mean. You know, no matter what lens I put this through, it's still the same fucking story. It's still the same idea that I've always been trying to convey, which is really that all of this is kind of my coming of age story. And that's kind of what the overlays mean, is a sense of persistence that I'll always, like, change, but it stays the same. Like, I just love the idea that Act 1 is just unrecognizable from Act 5. I love that. It's such a funny fucking thing. It's fucking everywhere at the end of time type beat. But regardless, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, and really the point of this entire game, is not only what lies beyond tier. You know, it's not only about that, but it's also about how much has changed, and that it will continue to change. But at the end of it all, really, I'm still me, I guess. this is kind of its own arc in a way, but not really, where I kind of want you all to realize that the ultimate idea has always been there, whether or not I knew it at first, whether or not I always had that idea there. I always just felt this need to make this serious because I just wanted something to project all these years of experiences onto. It's kind of my way of finding my place in things. Maybe I haven't found exactly my full final style, and I don't think I will. That's not really... That wouldn't be fun if you just already knew what your peak was when you're not even like 20 yet. But, you know, like, I guess just... No matter what, this whole thing has always just been about trying to find meaning in life, I guess. Trying to dig a hole where maybe I don't necessarily have to, but I want to. I want to figure shit out. I want things to make sense. And that has been the idea since 2015. Even before this turned into a full-on web series per se and was just a review series, it's always just been about finding out who the fuck I am. And in a way, that's really the point of that final question, like what those overlays mean. It's not necessarily like the memories of the beings or like some kind of like weird like alternate timeline shit. Like, yeah, you could interpret it as that, but at the end of the day, I didn't really know. And that was the answer, was I didn't know. Other than when I did those represented different feelings, different kinds of storytelling methods that I wanted to do, and I still haven't decided fully. But I think that's the fun of it, you know? I'm kind of, you know, in a bit of a, kind of rambling, really. It's me. You know, I'm kind of just really rambling, so to speak, but I guess my point is just all of this has been really fun, and I did all of this because it was fun at the end of the day. And if it isn't fun, then none of this would really be happening. I would have just stopped. That's why it's gone through so many changes. That's why I'm still doing it despite all those changes. I just enjoy doing this, really. There is even if I'm like a bit tired of doing tier constantly, you know, I want to move on to other things, but point is just, I hope you all see that the point of this game was that I'm really just thankful to be able to do all of this. And I wanted to go out with a bang with this final ARG segment, whatever the fuck it might be. You know, like just... No matter what happens, no matter how much this changes, the idea was always the same, I guess. And that's what it all means, really, at the end of the day. These different projects, all of this is my way of just figuring out my place and why I'm doing all of this. So, you know, I mentioned at the beginning of this game that I'd like to think that each game kind of made you look at the series in a bit of a different light. You know, game one obviously showed you that Exodus was just Tag, Eugene, like from the future, and that made you look at things quite differently, you know? It made you realize, oh, this is a lot bigger than I thought. Game two made you realize how important Izalo and Redacted were to all of this, that their influence is why tier even exists in the way that it does, and that made you also think, oh, this is a lot bigger than I thought. Game three is really just focusing on why I'm doing this at all. It's not just about why this happened, or why these things like occurred in that way. It's about why this exists, you know, because it never really accounted for everything before the whole being stuff happened. But now I am. And, you know, that's really the fun thing, is that I'm doing all of this for fun. I don't really give a shit about trying to follow some kind of trope or filling like some kind of checklist of whether this series is good or not. It's fun for me. And whether people like it or not, you know, it obviously does suck if people don't like it, but at the end of the day, if it fulfills me creatively, I guess I did something right. And in a way, the point of this game was to show you that all of this is real in a way. All of this, even if it is so unreal, and obviously these things did not truly happen, the idea is real. The essence is real. Those reviews were real. Those clips after 15 were real. Those weren't acting. And I think that's the best thing, honestly. Because people, you know, in this field, they always talk about fucking immersion and about how you have to stay in character all the time and all that business. I don't really give a shit. This thing is going to inevitably have those like holes where clearly I wasn't necessarily being in character. And that's the thing. I guess I decided to work with that. And what I have here now is something I don't think anyone else really has. You know, if we're talking about a specific web series. This is all genuine. This video is genuine. All of this. I don't really give a shit right now. And, you know, it's just now that this is happening, it's allowed me to kind of be more real in general again. I guess it's like a reverse gradient. We're going back to just, you know, not having necessarily an act, but just doing things because why the fuck not? And I'm happy that I finally got to that point. That's really why I wanted to do Act 6, because that would be that thing that would lead us right back where we started, and in a good way. One more video left. God. I guess that's enough for me, though. Point is, you've reached the end, and what you now know is it really was obvious the whole time. You were just uncertain because of the rules that you were taught. But the truth is, all of this has come from a real place. And I can't change that. And frankly, I'm fucking happy I can't. So I hope it makes you look at things a bit more now and makes you realize just how much bigger this really is, and for good. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose we'll talk more later, you know, after all this business is done. One more video left soon, and, yeah. It's over. So, I suppose I'll see you later. This is Eugene M / Yevi, signing off.